May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. We'd like to welcome you to this conference that is being convened by Al Jazeera Centre for Studies in cooperation with Al Jazeera Mubasher, entitled Renaissance Dam Between Negotiation-Based Settlements and Military Confrontation. So with a constellation of experts and a number of scholars that are specialized in the field. This comes at a time when the different parties were not able to reach an agreement as a result of the negotiations that have taken place in Kinshasa in April. And before Ethiopia started with the second filling of the dam, which is going to happen after a month, and after Addis Ababa stated that is going to continue with its effort, whether this is going to be through a consensus with Cairo or not. And the first session is going to look into the disparity between Egypt and Sudan and Ethiopia with regard to the importance of the Nile and the dam. And we're going to welcome our speakers. We're going to have with us here Mr. Hani Raslan. We have also with us from Stockholm, Mr. Yassine Ahmed from the Ethiopian Institute for Popular Diplomacy. And we have also with us Mr. Sami Ahmed, the university professor. So we'd like to start with this theme, the theme of the first session. Each guest is going to have 5 minutes. We'd like to start with Mr. Hani Raslan. So in the prelude of the constitution, it says that the Nile is something that is granted and it is of great importance to Egypt. Yes, it is very important indeed, and Egypt gets 97% of its water resources from the Nile. So they rely a great deal on these water resources. So this is very important when it comes to history, culture, everything. So the Nile is part and parcel of the personality in general of Egyptians. So the importance and the danger of this crisis is that Egypt needs 114 billion square meter. So 55% comes from the Nile and 4% comes from underground water, and the rest comes from precipitation. So what Egypt needs is 80 billion. 20% comes from the reuse that happens many, many times. So Egypt is the first country in on the continent of Africa and in the Middle East when it comes to the use of reuse of water resources. And there are so many projects of hundreds of billions of Egyptian pound that rely on this particular matter, which is the reuse of water resources. So the Egyptians or Egypt suffers from poverty and lack of water resources. So we talk about 55 billion. So this is going to lead to huge losses. So each 5 billion square meters is going to lead to so many losses, so million acres of land, and this is going to impact the livelihood of so many families that rely on these lands. So this is going to lead to the gap in terms of food security, and this is going to impact families, and this is going to lead also to so many social conflicts and difficulties. So many people are going to migrate to cities from the countryside without having any skills. So the economy would have to try to compensate for these losses. So consequently, the interest of Egypt and the Egyptian people at large in this crisis, and the fact that they follow up with this crisis is not something that comes from a vacuum. So as the representatives have said, that this is an existential kind of crisis, and this is a very, very meticulous depiction of the situation. So we should not take it lightly, because this is going to lead to repercussions, and this is going to impact the stability of the region. The Horn of Africa has abundance of water, so it has 100 million acres that relies on precipitation of water. They have also sheep, so Ethiopia wants to get a share of that in order to sell water or to use it in a way or another. And there are so many testaments to that that we cannot perhaps elaborate on now. So we have a fabricated kind of crisis. So we have the renaissance is only going to lead to 1,800 megawatts and not 5,600. So as it is said, so this is a crisis when it comes to the average that is needed. And this is only going to cater for a small city. So it is as large as the Nasr neighborhood in Cairo. So this is a kind of a made-up kind of crisis that is being incited by Ethiopia through claiming that it is the one that owns the river. And this is something that leads to a lot of surprise for a country to claim that it owns solely a transborder river. It wants to control the river and others. So there is perhaps a will to inflict harm on Egypt, and this is not in keeping with the international conventions and also regional cooperation, and also this is also impacting the right for self-defense when it comes to Egypt. So please stay with us, Mr. Hani Raslan. I would like to move to Khartoum. I would like to move to Mr. Sami Mohammed Ahmed. Dr. Sami, and you're with us live through the phone. When the White Nile meets with the Blue Nile in Sudan. So can you talk to us about the importance of the Nile River for the Sudanese and Sudan? So the Nile River has a great importance when it comes to Sudanese. So the Sudanese people, they rely on the Nile when it comes to drinking water and irrigation. And a shortage of water would lead to so many problematics for countries. And here I would like to indicate that the Nahda Dam are used for electricity, and this relies on the flow of water. So definitely the water is going to flow towards Khartoum and Egypt. But the problematic lies in the fact that negotiations over the dam are facing so many difficulties. So there should be a kind of a binding accord or agreement. So dams exist in all parts of the world, and investments take place, partnerships happen between countries. So the problematic lies in the fact that there is intransigence, and the intransigence leads to problems to all parties. And we know that conflicts, water-related conflicts, should be solved peacefully, and any aggressions on water resources is forbidden in keeping with international conventions and agreements. And this is also in disagreement with the UN Convention of the year 1997. So water should not be stopped, should not be blocked, so as not other countries would benefit from those resources. So Ethiopia should not do so, because this is going to hold it accountable as per the law, and Ethiopia should not carry out such acts. So we talk about a hydroelectrical kind of dam. So it is used for the generation of electricity, and it should not be treated as such. I would like to move now to Mr. Yassin Ahmed. Mr. Yassin, Ethiopians have always called the Blue Nile Abai. So how important is the Blue Nile for Ethiopians? In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, thank you very much for hosting us, Dr. Mustafa Ashur. I would like to thank you. I'd like to thank your dear guests. I cannot see the studio. I cannot see. Can you see me clearly? Yes, we can see you clearly. Everything is okay. I cannot see you, but anyway, can you please repeat the question? So, the Ethiopians have always called the Blue Nile a pie. So, how important is the Blue Nile for Ethiopians? So, the Blue Nile for Ethiopians is a source of life. It is one of the basic components of life for Ethiopians. Ethiopians consider the Blue Nile as one of the sources of life. Particularly now in Ethiopia, the Blue Nile is considered as one of the most important resources of development of electricity or power generation. So, particularly through the Nahda or Renaissance Dam. So this is not used for agricultural purposes because Ethiopia has precipitation of water throughout the seasons, but also it is used in agriculture precipitation. But the Blue Line, it is a trans-border river, so it is the only source in order to generate electricity. So the Blue Nile for Ethiopia is not for agriculture. No, it is not used for that. So it is used for hydropower. So there are in excess of 70 million that live in complete darkness. So that is why the Blue Nile is one of the most important resources of economic development and also for the lighting of in excess of 70 million. So 70 million would have access to power, to electricity. As our brothers in Egypt say, the Nile is a source of life for them. So the same applies to us. So that is why we'd like to have a fair use of this resource. So there's not going to be any decent life without it is the artery of life. So we need to have electricity, whether this applies to infrastructure development or economic development, and so on and so forth. So the Nahda or the Renaissance Dam is for hydropower, for electricity, and not for agriculture. So this means that this is going to be useful for countries, upstream and downstream countries, but this only can happen through fair use of these resources in keeping with the International Convention for Non-Navigation Waters. And this agreement talks about 3 points, which is the fair use of an international river and also cooperation between the different countries that border with such a river and not to inflict any harm on any of those neighboring countries. So from this standpoint, Ethiopia moves and acts in keeping with these conventions, and Ethiopia respects these criteria. So this is part of the riparian states. So we talk about the people, the state, from the upstream to the downstream. So I would like to remind you that the 1997 convention has mentioned that there should be a fair and just use of the different resources. So as I told you, so these are 3 priorities for Ethiopia. So these are the priorities when it comes to the Renaissance Dam. We talk about hydropower and at the same time a complementary irrigation source. And it is used in case there is a shortage of precipitation. And also the third priority is a legal and a political priority, which means that Ethiopia does not want to give legitimacy to the bilateral agreement between Egypt and Sudan that claims complete sovereignty on the water of Nile, and also the sharing of shares between the upstream and downstream countries. So Ethiopia wishes to have an entity that would oversee the fair and just use of water. So Antibe Framework is the solution. So Egypt and Sudan, when they withdrew from Antibe and did not want to be part to this agreement, so 6 countries out of 11 have signed this agreement. So please, can you clarify to the audience so this particular point? So the Antibe agreement talks about all riparian states. Ethiopia is a riparian state in addition to Egypt and Sudan. Ethiopia, the other countries have nothing to do with this framework. So if you can clarify this particular point. Also, we have the 1959 agreement, which was between Egypt and Sudan to share what is remaining of the water that come to them as an downstream, countries. So all the Nile basin agreed through the initiative and through Antibe Convention that was signed in Uganda. And now, if we compare between the priorities of Ethiopia and the priorities of Egypt, so the priority, the apparent, of course, there's apparent, and also there are other things that are not apparent. So they want to increase their share out of the Nile water. So this is the first priority for Egypt. And also they want to have an agreement that would be binding over Ethiopia. So if we say that the Blue Nile is a Nile that concerns Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, but if Ethiopia accepts the Egyptian and Sudanese demand to make the agreement binding, that means that this is going to inflict harm on Ethiopia because it is going to give legitimacy to this bilateral agreement that Ethiopia had never been party to. So when Ethiopia, when it requested to be a third party to the 1959 agreements, both Egypt and Sudan declined. So the binding agreement, if it is approved by Ethiopia, it is going to harm Ethiopia, and this is going to lead to Egyptian and Sudanese hegemony on the countries, the riparian states of the Nile. They're going to say that we have bound Ethiopia and the other countries should follow suit. They have to also accept this binding agreement. So that is why Ethiopia declines this binding kind of agreement. So that is why they want to have a system which is going to be based on cooperation between the countries from upstream to downstream. We would like to start with Hani Raslan. If we're going to talk about the hegemony, so we're going to have 5 minutes for each and every guest. So if you have any reply to what Mr. Yassin and Dr. Sami had said, so we would like to talk also about an agreement that is going to be binding. So if you can comment on this. But there are queries and questions throughout history. Rulers of Egypt have always tried to secure the upstreams of Nile. So has this changed? First of all, I would like to respond to what Mr. Yassin had said with all due respect to his person. But this has become really, really boring when we keep on hearing all these untruthful data and present such data as if they are facts. I have mentioned on different occasions that this is unacceptable and unethical. So Mr. Yassin talks about the Nile water as the only source of power, to generate power. So there are so many dams, there are so many harms that have been inflicted on Kenya through certain dams, and also Somalia had been impacted also. So Ethiopia harmed so many other countries as a result of that. And as we know, the Blue Nile, to say that the Blue Nile is the only source of power, this is not true. The reality is different altogether. So I would like to talk about the other sources. We talk about underground water, and the United States of America has given so much aid to Ethiopia because it has so many benefits and positives when it comes to extracting water, underground water. So the argument that Ethiopia keeps on saying that 70 million are going to live in darkness and it is very important for development. Yes, energy is very important for development, but the dam is not going to cater for 70 million, not even 5 million, let alone 70 million. Because as I have mentioned, scientifically speaking, so the dam only generates by average or on average 1,800 megawatts, and this is going to be only enough for a small city. So had the dam been dedicated to the generation of energy, it would not have been only able to generate 1,800 there. No, this is not a large kind of amount. This amount is going to be just 1 month. So this is the highest percentage of generation. The dam would not be able to generate power at this level. So we're not talking about 6,000 megawatts per month and the remaining months generate nothing. No, I didn't say that. These are scientific data. This is based on research, and Ethiopians, they know that, but trying to mislead us through the data that has been given, this is not acceptable. So if the dam caters for 30% and also Saad Al Adi would be catering for 60%, perhaps this is going to lead to higher potential and no harm would be on the two countries in the downstream, Egypt and Sudan. So the speaker did not talk about technical matters that are very important indeed. We're talking about seasons of drought. So Saad Al Ali is going to be empty. So who is going to refilling the Nahda or the Renaissance Dam? Ethiopia does not want to commit and does not want to sign. And this is going to impact greatly Egypt if there is a long term or a long season of drought, and if Asad Al Ali goes through a season of drought. So they have not mentioned the 1902, 1952 agreements. They have not been mentioned. So the flow should happen as it is the case. So these are maneuvers that are being used, and this should not be the case. So here we are in a conference. We would like, please, to have cordial criticism of each other. I'm talking in keeping with the figures and numbers and statistics that I have. These are based on scientific research. My reservation is about the word lies. Yes, these are lies because this is in disparity with reality. What would you call it? So repeating such words many, many times, talking about hegemony, Dr. Hani, has Egypt lost its hegemony, its influence on the Nile? These are lies. Those who say that Egypt used to use its influence to get the upper hand over the Nile, this is not true. So the Nile basin countries, they get 7,000 billion square meters of the precipitation. So if we talk about the Nile basin, we talk about 1,650 billion. Egypt only gets 55 billion, so only 3% of the total precipitation of the Nile basin. To say that Egypt controls the Nile, this is not true. So we have water that is outside the flow of the river that leads to underground water and renewed water, and they talk only about blue water within the stream to show that Egypt uses the highest share, where does 1,650 billion. So my question about the hegemony of Egypt, the political role. I'm going to reach this point if you can bear with me. So Egypt has a long history of cooperation. Egypt does not impose its hegemony. Egypt has funded the establishment of O&M. And up to now, there are Egyptian experts and there are other agricultural projects that are funded by Egypt. There are hundreds of wells that have been funded by Egypt. So Egypt has so many initiatives that have been undertaken. So the hegemony that they talk about is not as it is expressed. So Egypt has so many projects, and these countries on the Nile basin, they have one resource, and there should be a cooperation that should not impact any party, but there is a hidden agenda. But I have to say it is not that hidden. They talk about the use of the dam strategically and politically, and after all that we do listen to these fallacies that are deliberately expressed here because they just want to impact the situation, and this is not scientific thoughts and words based on studies. I would like to move now to Dr. Sami Mohammed Ahmed. Dr. Sami, so Sudan remains between Ethiopia as an upstream and Egypt as a downstream, as a last station. Sudan had different positions when it comes to the Renaissance Dam and the relationship between countries and states. What are the transformations that have happened in terms of the position and hegemony of Sudan? We all are aware of the importance of the Nile River for Sudan. And the discussion has happened about water security, the guarantees, and we are aware that Sudan needs more water resources because talking about the 1959 agreement is very important because Sudan has been impacted at great length by this agreement. It had been directly impacted by the 1959 convention or agreement because it has given to Egypt 55%, 55.5%, and Sudan 18 billion. So we know that the Sudan is the food basket of the world, and Sudan needs to use water for agriculture. So this agreement is not in favor of Sudan. It is not in the benefit of the Sudan. This is not a fair agreement. And here I would like to underline, Sudan is not a downstream country, it is a transit country. But it seems that the opinion of Dr. Hani entails that he wants Sudan and other countries would become thirsty irrespective of the fact that water transits its country, the river transits its country. So that is why there are 214 joint rivers worldwide. So countries that are bordering the riparian countries should agree and reach an agreement. And this applies to so many rivers, such as the Rhine River and so on and so forth. So there are certain countries that have 30 dams, but they are no problematic. So that is why we have to reach a solution with regard to this matter. We have to have water justice. Dr. Sami, I just wanted to remind you here, my question was the transformations that have happened with regard to the position of Sudan. Yes, I'm coming to that, but it was necessary to give this introduction. So the position of Sudan at the beginning, they were having concerns, and there were studies that have been carried out that have proven that the dam would be useful for Sudan, the Renaissance Dam would be useful of Sudan, and the official position of Sudan was in favor of the Renaissance Dam because it is in keeping with fair and just use of the dam. So the problematic does not lie in the Renaissance Dam, but the concern is that we should have a binding agreement that should be binding to all parties. So Ethiopia wants to use it for agriculture. So Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt, all of them have the right to use these resources. So this is part of water justice. So this is the problematic. And this is the reason why negotiations have stopped. So the position of Sudan is very clear. So Sudan has studied the situation and realized that the Nahda or Renaissance Dam is going to be in the interest of Sudan. So this conflict that is happening, we would like it not to develop and lead to confrontation. So we do not want this to end up in a conflict between countries. So this is not something that we would like to have. So that is why we would like all parties to sit and negotiate. Dr. Sami, some would respond to you, even the negotiators that have been negotiating for 7 years or even more have not reached any result. In your view, why they were not able to reach a solution or a result in this regard? So there are a number of problematics, there are a number of issues that impact the negotiations. So the Renaissance Dam is a very important topic, and the most important impediments is a lack of a political will, and also the fact that these countries are impacted by their internal positions. These positions also impact the negotiation process, and this leads to many, many problematics. So that is why the political will is perhaps linked sometimes to some internal matters and problematics, such as the lands in Al-Fashaga area. So there was a problematic that impacted the political will. Although these matters are separate and they should be solved within a certain framework, so the lack of flexibility and cooperation is the main reason why negotiations have not been successful and Sudan has been impacted a great deal. So lack of cooperation, the lack of concerted efforts between the different countries. So Ethiopia carried out the first fill-in and did not notify Sudan. And Sudan went through a crisis, as it was expressed by the Minister of Irrigation. So we talk about drinking water here. So such lack of cooperation is very problematic. So the same applies to Egypt. It violated the Principles Declaration when it comes to Article 10. And also Sudan talked about the principles declaration and talked about the problematics that have happened within this framework. So the lack of cooperation is the main reason that leads to the situation that we are having. That is why there should be peaceful means of communication and coordination. And this is something that is incumbent on us all as neighboring countries. So we have to cooperate between ourselves for the interest of all countries. So please stay with us, Dr. Sami Muhammad Ahmed, and I would like to move to Sayyid Mr. Yassin from Stockholm. So Mr. Yassin, talking about this binding agreement, as our guest from Sudan had said, who has called for a peaceful agreement, because these are important matters, as it is the case in all countries of the world. My question is about Ethiopian influence or hegemony and the role of Ethiopia when it comes to Nile water. And you mentioned the Antibe agreements that is rejected by both Egypt and Sudan, saying that the other countries have nothing to do with Blue Nile water. So what are the changes that have happened in Ethiopian position now? Before I answer your question, let me comment on what Hani Raslan had said with all respect to his scientific position. Please, yes, you have the right to respond, but we hope that this seminar is not going to derail. This is not a TV program. This is a research conference. Yes, I would like, with all objectivity, discuss with Dr. Hani Raslan. Dr. Hani Raslan said that Ethiopia has 950 cubic meters of precipitation, and the international law does not talk about precipitation. And we're talking here about a transborder river, and not all the precipitations fall in Blue Nile. So even international law does not talk about precipitation that are in countries. The international law talks about transborder rivers. So experts, negotiators from all three countries have consensus vis-à-vis this matter. So the speaker said that An-Nahda is not going to have or lead to the percentage he mentioned. No, Ethiopia intends to build other dams in order to generate power, because we want to achieve 45,000 megawatts, because Egypt has 60,000 megawatts. So, Mr. Yassin, I would like to correct something. Even if it is 45 megawatts, so 1.7 of that water is from the high dam, and the rest is from diesel and gas stations. No problem. The most important thing, so the most important source of hydropower is the Blue Nile, and the Blue Nile is going to generate hydropower and then would let water flow to the countries. I would like to quote Mr. Al-Dawahiri, who is a negotiating technician or technical expert. So Mr. Raslan speaks to us as a strategic expert, but I would like to talk about the opinion of technical experts. I had the chance to listen to Dr. Ala Al-Dawahiri, who is a technical expert, and who said that Egypt is not going to be subjected to thirst, nor its agriculture is going to be impacted. And he said the objective is to generate power or electricity, and this is in disparity with all the wrong information that is being broadcast in media. So, commenting on what Sami Muhammad Ahmed had said, when he said that the problem lies in water justice. So instead of us talking about points of disparity or disagreement, why wouldn't we talk about the commonalities, the common points? how can we reach complementarity, economic cooperation? This can only be achieved through water justice, and this can only be achieved through Nile reconciliation, which means that we have to achieve water justice. So what do you mean by water justice? Perhaps those who are listening to us, our spectators, would like to perhaps know, because this is a new concept. So we know that there is a fair and just use of water. What is water justice from the perspective of Ethiopia? So as it was mentioned by Dr. Sami from Sudan, your dear guest, he mentioned, and this is one of the implicit objectives of Egypt, saying that another dam or Renaissance dam is going to enable Sudan to get the surplus of its share. I ask you about water justice from the standpoint of Ethiopia. If you can clarify this point to us, please. Water justice from the standpoint of Ethiopia is that these historic shares and agreements that have happened during the colonial time, these are unjust agreements. They are not just agreements, and they're in contradiction with international law that was adopted in 1997 and 2017 that says that there should be a fair and just use of resources through joint efforts without inflicting harm on other countries. So I'm here to moderate. If there are any questions, I try to pose the other perspectives of opinions. So you said that these agreements that have been signed during the colonial time, but there are also other agreements. We talk about 1902 between Egypt and Sudan when they were under British occupation, and the agreement that was signed entailed that Ethiopia would get Beni Shangul region on condition that it would not go and establish or build dams, and this agreement would be useful to Ethiopia. So there are disparities of opinion when it comes to the understanding and interpretation of this agreement. The Ethiopians see in this agreement when Menelik II, the emperor, he talks about that no harm should be inflicted on the countries of downstream. And Egypt did not say that there should not be any dams or unfair use of the water of the Nile, but the Egyptians want to interpret it to their own liking. So had the situation been different, both Egypt and Sudan would have perhaps protested in front of the international community. So now, through the building of the Renaissance Dam, Ethiopia is not as it used to be. The balance of power has changed. And if there are any intentions from the two countries, the downstream countries, Egypt and Sudan, so I think that the objective should be complementarity between the different countries, cooperation between the two countries. And this can be achieved only through water justice, through the Antibe Agreement. Mr. Yassin, some have described this agreement as being obsolete. So you're talking about justice, but there are some others who say that in Egypt and Sudan and even Ethiopia, President Sisi was the first president that he recognized the building of a dam. So why haven't they reached an agreement on the points that have been mentioned by Ala Ad-Darawahiri, talking about years of drought and so on and so forth. So if we talk about justice here, why didn't Ethiopia respond to the recognition of both Egypt and Sudan about the recognition of the building of the Renaissance Dam? Ethiopia wants to reach a fair agreement that would be satisfactory to all three parties in keeping with international standards that were adopted after the historical shares and agreements that have taken place during British colonialism, and even the agreements, the bilateral agreement between Egypt and Sudan in 1959 also was adopted before the international law was adopted with regard to the flow of water. Can you imagine, Mr. Rashur? So international law is new. So this is the problematic with regard to this law. So there is a disparity between countries. So Egypt that tries to keep these agreements and wants them to be implemented. Talking about drought. So talking about what Mr. Ala al-Dawahiri had said, so Ethiopia also talks about cooperation during moments and seasons of drought. It should be based on the sharing of gains and also the sharing of harm. So Egypt puts conditions. Was that verbally? So when it comes to relations between countries, you have mentioned something here, and you said that Ethiopia is going to cooperate with Egypt and Sudan when it comes to the harm. Is this cooperation is something verbal or is it something written? Of course, it should be written. Yes, what Ethiopia is calling for, it wants to have a binding kind of agreement that should be based on trust, on complementarity and cooperation. We're going to go back to the details, yes, but because of the time limit, I would like to give the opportunity to the remaining guests. So we, the three countries, why would be a burden on the West? We have all these goods. We have this great river. If we agree on cooperation, this is going to lead to no problems whatsoever. So this is going to be the third pillar that we're going to discuss. I would like to move to Mr. Hani Raslan. Mr. Hani Rasman, are there any exaggerations when it comes to the position of the three countries? Is the importance equal or is there a difference in terms of importance? And what are the parameters of the position of Egypt vis-à-vis the Renaissance Dam? Definitely, there are differences, disparities when it comes to the importance of the Nile River for the three countries. But before we answer this question in 1 minute, I would like to clarify a piece of information, to clarify what Dr. Sami had said. He said that the 1959 agreement was unjust and that they want us to, what he talked about. I didn't even mention Sudan. So I'd like to tell Dr. Sami, in 1958 or 1959, when the agreement was signed, the consumption of Sudan was only 4 billion cubic meter, and Egypt had a consumption of 8 billion cubic meter. So they have so many water passages. So at the time they were smaller, but the current network is much larger. So there was 32 billion cubic meters, and the high dam was established in order to benefit from these shares. So the 32 billion, after evaporation, there is only 22 billion that is shared between Egypt and Sudan. So 2/3 to Sudan, so 14.5 plus 4, 18.5. And Egypt had used the natural flow, 48, and was given 7.5 from 28.5. So this was the results. So this has led 55.5 and 18.5. So there is no injustice. So if Sudan takes 2/3, how would it be oppressed or subjected to injustices? So 83 of Sadd al-Ali is within Sudanese territories as opposed to what is being said in social media. So they talk about drowning the different the things that have been saved by UNESCO, and these are available in Khartoum. So we would like this to be documented because this is very important. Because these are used in political discussions and it is not as it is the case in reality. So Sudan does not consume as it is said. It consumes all its share, and the water in the dams is 28 billion and not 18.5 billion. And Sudan has the right to use this as in the Rosiris dam, we have 18 million, and in Marawi also dam, and also we have some other dams, and so on and so forth.
The second part of the question, Mr. Mustafa, I was talking about the exaggeration on the position of the three countries about the value of the Nile water, and is it of the same value to the three countries, or is it varies? And what about the parameters of Egypt on the importance of the importance of the Nile water? The foreign minister did not acknowledge harm that is done. That's an approach that we cannot generalize. This is some kind of misinformation. Of course, the importance vary. If we talk about the importance of the Nile to Egypt, it's the main source of water and life and culture and history and art. And every Egyptian individual contemplate on the or understand the importance of the Nile. So the Nile is very important for Egypt. However, Sudan have other sources of water. They have the rainwater, as Dr. Sami said, that rainwater contributes even to the levels of the water. But the problem is not the flow of the water, however, on the coordination with other Ethiopian dams, because the Sudanese dams are small and the Ethiopians are huge dams. The impact, if there was a lack of coordination, that will lead to the depletion of the Sudanese water. Most of the irrigation agriculture in Sudan is between the Sudanese-Ethiopian border all the way to the north of Khartoum. Therefore, there's a threat to the Sudanese national security, as the official statements mention. So Egypt is concerned about the quantities, and Sudan is concerned by the data and the information. And there are so many details in this regard that we cannot talk about. And as also Mr. Yassin have mentioned on cooperation, Sisi himself went to the Ethiopian parliament and he talked about Egyptian parameters on the Nile water, that no harm caused or received. Yes, the water is important for Ethiopia development, but it's existential for Egypt. If they want to generate power, there are some formulas, even simple ones, that even the European and the Americans talk about, even in this agreement that have been reached in Washington, and Ethiopia refused to sign on. So this formula of no harm is done. So, and even this is one of the principles in international law. And if the harm is done, Ethiopia will have to recompensate Egypt. And Ethiopia have avoided all the studies of the implication of this of the dam, whether ecological or environmental. They act like they are the owners of the Nile, and they would like to make strategical benefits of this. So all of this talk is around the ownership of the Nile and the exploitation of this ownership to political gains and dominance, and this is very peculiar. These aspirations that could become realities. A state would like to become a superpower on the expense of other countries. Mr. Hani Raslan, please remain with us. I will go to Dr. Sami. This conflict between the three countries, is it about politics, environment, and what about the position of Sudan on the Renaissance Dam? I would like to start by referring to the 1959 agreement, and as Dr. Hani have said that they have given more water to Sudan. That agreement was complementary to the 1902 agreement. So this agreement was unjust to the Sudanese people because the Sudanese people cannot expand in agriculture. Now it's the agriculture is the lung of Sudan, and Sudan cannot achieve development without agriculture expanding. If the quota of Sudan shrinked, and as well on Egypt, Sudan will be affected. Is that true? I will comment on that, and this is the most important thing. The 1959 agreement have stated that Sudan will carry, or Dr. Sami, sorry for the interruption. You have mentioned the 1959 agreement and said it's unjust, and Dr. Hani Raslan have responded and you clarified this thing. But please answer to my question because our time is limited and we still have Mr. Yassin. So what is the disagreement between Sudan and Ethiopia on the Renaissance Dam? Or there is an agreement between both countries, or maybe there is a disagreement with Egypt on the Renaissance Dam? As you have said, Sudan agree with Ethiopia that this is an essential right of Ethiopia to follow their development. However, there's a binding agreement, and I would like to talk about the water justice. This is based on ethical principles and legal ones as well, and also stem its power from the international custom and law. This concept of water justice is one of the prerequisite or requirement so that water is not subject to supply and demand, and water is also considered social resources, not economical resources. And despite that the world say that water should be an economic resource. However, the world was not able to execute this issue, but water should be thought about from limit the waste of the water and the best usage of the water. So everyone should sit around the table to find a solution that is acceptable by all the parties and would have also benefits for everyone. Getting into conflict is not in the benefit of anyone. There should be a true political desire or will to solve this problem. The problem is there because there's a lack of political will. There should be a trust between these countries, and they what happens in the previous period, there was a lack of trust. Dr. Sami, I was waiting for your time to up. Again, we'll go back to the Sudanese position about Sadda. Do they have a reservation about Sadda Nahda? Do they accept the Renaissance Dam? Sudan is not against the Renaissance Dam as an entity, as a project, but it's they have a conversation reservation about the agreements about the dam. I have told you that there are countries that have 10 dams on a shared river or so, but there are some agreements that regulates the management of the dam. So we would like a binding agreement that save the rights or protect the rights of all the parties. And even Saad al-Ali in Egypt applied the same rule. Thank you, Mr. Sami. Please remain with us. Now, talking about the comparison between the two dams, and some say that Saad al-Ali is at the end of the downstream, however, the Renaissance in the upstream. So we will remain with this idea, and we will conclude with Mr. Syed Ahmed. So we would like to conclude talking about this notion. Mr. Yassin Ahmed, we are still talking about this agreement and the different point of views between the three countries. And I would like to please to focus on this idea. Is the balance of power between three countries enable Sudan to go into conflict with Sudan and Egypt? So what are the determinants of Sudan, of Ethiopia, on the issue of the Renaissance Dam? Actually, the Renaissance Dam is an opportunity to cooperation and end this conflict that have lasted for more than 1 year. As Dr. Sami Muhammad said from Sudan, and I agree with him, the disagreement between Sudan and Egypt is about agreement of 1902 and 1959. Mr. Yassin, we are talking about the Ethiopian position, not the Sudanese and Egyptian position, and the 1959 agreement. So we have heard from both Sudanese and Egyptian point of views. We would like the Ethiopian point of view. So the Nile, you cannot give the chance to the Sudanese and Egyptian to talk and not allow to Ethiopia. The Nile is shared. We all drink from the same water. The problem between Sudan and Egypt, not with Ethiopia, the Renaissance Dam came to release all these constraints and to bring back the water just to those countries. Let's talk about your question and Ethiopia position now. The power balance have changed. Ethiopia is have transformed. And Egypt is a great country and have a role in the African continent. Egypt, with its is a bridge between Africa and the Arab world. Therefore, we thought about what join these countries, what bring these countries together, that actually why the problems of agriculture cannot be sorted out through cooperation. Sudan is a massive country. They could fulfill the needs of the farmers and the needs of the Sudanese and Egyptian and Ethiopian people. And Ethiopia could have also a huge or massive animal resources and water, and that can provide other Sudan and Egypt. So this is very good what you are saying, but I would like to ask you something, and I think Mr. Sami and where they say, why don't we go to a negotiation to start building on what is common and agreed on, and then reach an agreement on the Sudan? Why we haven't reached an agreement yet? The agreement should be based on international standards, and I agree with Dr. Sami. There should be a political will from three countries because the people of the three countries have what joins them, the history, the interest. On the contrary, we are in a need from our countries to put the interest of the people and put their party's interests at the back. So, frankly speaking, I say yes, we can reach an just agreement that is satisfactory to the three parties, however, based on standards that achieve water justice, and we need to recompensate any shortage, whether to Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, from other fields. The fields of cooperation are many, have no limits. Please, Mr. Yassin, remain with us. Our time is up for this session, and we have so many comments on the social media from our audience. Please remain with us, and I will give you the chance to comment on what our audience is asking or saying. Now we move to the social media segment and read some of the comments of our followers on Twitter and Facebook, and then we give the chance to our guest to respond to those comments. Well, the question on the social media was about the importance of the water of the Nile to the three countries. Is it of the same importance or it is different? So we have received many participation from Dr. Abdel Tawab Barakat, who wonder why Egypt and Sudan do not call to reduce the size of the dam from 14 billion square meter to be a 14 billion square meter, not 74 billion square meter, because such a size of the dam will have a catastrophic implications on the downstream countries, and the threat will be existential on Egypt that relies on the Nile. And another contribution, in Egypt you have Sadd al-Ali. Why why Ethiopia is not allowed to have their own dam? Another comment from Anwar al-Komi, who said the Renaissance Dam project was initiated in 2000. Why were Egypt and Ethiopia back then when they started the project? Another contribution saying that the Renaissance Dam is an old project and agreement of principle have been signed. Why all this commotion on the agreement after all of that time, and why the three countries do not negotiate on all the issues? Another comment, why can't Ethiopia distribute the water equally or fairly on the downstream countries? Salah Abdel Basit say why Ethiopia have started building the Renaissance Dam during the conspiracy of the 25th of January 2011. It feels like if it's a thief stealing in the dark night. I will go back with those comments from citizens from these three countries. I give 1 minute for every one of our guests to comment on our social media comments, please. The comments to be on those comments. Mr. Raslan, you have 1 minute. Of course, in the principle of agreement, accepted that said with all its specification, and that shows the will of Egypt to reach an agreement with Ethiopia, and Egypt was very flexible, and they were patient over 10 years to reach that agreement, and saying that Egypt also accept the right of Ethiopia to development, and they have suggested a fund for the development in Ethiopia, and also an economic cooperation project. But all of that have gone with the wind because there's a hidden agenda. And as I have said, it's about the ownership of the Nile and exploiting this ownership for political, economical gain. And of course, that will put the stability of this region on the stake. Of course, the right to self-defense is guaranteed. And if there was an insistence to harm the Egyptian, then no one can predict the consequences. I go to Mr. Sami Muhammad Ahmed, the professor from Khartoum. How do you comment on those social media participation from Egyptian, Ethiopian, and Sudanese citizens? I would like to say first that Sudan have accepted the capacity of Renaissance Dam, which is 74 billion square meter, because dams to contribute to development need to be of such volume and to avoid the percentage of evaporation. So Sudan did not object on the volume and the capacity of the dam. And in this regard, I would like to say that the Renaissance Dam is not one only dam. There are two dams, and it's a big reservoir of water. However, this notion of conspiracy and timing, those dams, and as academia, following the Ethiopian strategy and combating poverty, Ethiopia would like to uplift their citizens, and they would like to best exploit their and those hydroelectrical water do not save the water, but they would like the flowing water or the movement of the water to move the turbines. I go to our Ethiopian guest about Mr. Yasin about the last the comments on the social media. From my point of view, I say that we are the Nile countries. It's about time to activate the people's diplomacy and to stay away or steer away from the conspiracy theory. The Nile is for everyone. It's Allah grant to the people of the nation of the area, and the Nile is a shared resource, and also protecting the Nile is a shared responsibility. Ethiopia demand the participation of Egypt and is to and Ethiopia now they have the desire to involve Egypt and Sudan to manage and operate the Renaissance Dam. If they agree to involve also Ethiopia in the management of Al-Ali Dam or Sadd Al-Ali, because without this trust between the two countries, we cannot go nowhere. So I believe it's about time to activate the people diplomacy. And I remember the first official delegation of people diplomacy was in Mohammed Morsi, the late president. He sent a delegation to Ethiopia. Mr. Yasin, this that was during Assam Sharaf government before the election of Mohammed Morsi. I thank you for your contribution. By this, we reach the end of the first session of the conference organized by Jazeera Studies Center with cooperation with the Jazeera Mubasher about the Renaissance Dam and the military options. I would like to extend thanks to our guest, Mr. Hani Raslan from Egypt, from Ahram Strategic Studies. Thank you very much. And via phone, we ask Dr. Sami Muhammad Ahmed, the professor, and also from Stockholm, we thank Mr. Yasin Ahmed, the chairman of Ethiopian Center for People Diplomacy. The next session will be after a while, so we tell our audience to stay with us.